Alright, what's up, everybody? Okay, so first of all, I'm so sorry for the long hiatus. A lot of the episodes that I was missing they were filmed over the holidays, and things were just really busy then. Editors were taking a long break. We were taking a long break company wide, and so we had to work ahead on some things. And so when we came back from break, we had to catch up on a lot of things, and things just got really busy, and I wasn't able to record my spiel on time. But I didn't want to leave you guys hanging, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to analyze season 2, because this is the season that I did not give it its due diligence on first watch, and I've really enjoyed watching season 2, so I went back and I recorded all of my missing episodes. So here we go. And by the way, a big thank you to everybody that's been showing me love and support in the comments. For the way I've been doing these breakdowns. It keeps me motivated to keep doing them, so thank you so much. And honestly, not being part of the couch crew on this one was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it allowed me to experiment with this format, and I really like this format, and it seems like you guys really like it too. So maybe this is something that we might be able to do with future shows and other normies, because we're all passionate about different shows. So maybe we'll do something cool with this format. But thank you so much for all the support. It means a lot, and it keeps me motivated to keep making these. So anyways, without further ado, The Wire 2x3. Let's talk about it. So Omar's back, and it looks like he's back with a new boo thing. And we see another stick-up crew in town. Omar's got some competition now. There's a new stick-up crew in town, and he wasn't too pissed about it. He was like, damn, all right, I can't even be mad. That was impressive. Broad daylight. I was going to come tonight, but they had the balls to do it in broad daylight. So, can't even be mad about it. And, obviously he sticks up the stick-up crew later on in the episode. And then they end up working together by the end of the episode, and obviously it's two, attractive women, and they're being really flirty with Omar. And his new boyfriend isn't really having any of that. He's pretty jealous about it, but yeah, I don't know. This was just kind of an episode to kind of grow Omar's crew again. Pour one out for Brandon and the other guys. So anyways, there's a new stick-up crew, and they stake out a place and then they rob it. And what's really fucked up is they used a kid. And using that kid was a big part of the robbery, because that was like the misdirection. But it's really messed up that Omar would use a kid. So, Omar, Stringer, Avon, Prop Joe, all these people are really fun to watch, but they're not good people. And, we like to root for Omar because he's kind of, he's not a good guy, but he's kind of, we don't like Avon and his crew and the things that he's done, so we sympathize or empathize with Omar. But he straight up used a kid for this stick-up. And when the door busted open, I was like, okay, they'll at least leave the kid outside, because like the guns were pointed, anything could have happened. Violence could have erupted, that could have died. That kid could have easily been injured or died. And I was like, surely they're going to leave the kid outside. But no, everybody rushes inside, and they're carrying the kid inside. And it was just like, dude, what? It was one of those moments where I was like, damn, Omar, I don't know. It's hard to be supportive of that one. I'm all for him robbing drug dealers and doing whatever he needs to do. But bringing kids into the equation is just like, man, I don't know about that one. Now let's talk about Bunk and Lester. They got a lot of screen time this episode, and obviously we have the famous scene where they're interviewing the people in all the different foreign languages. I was only able to understand one, which was Hindi, the Indian guy, and all he really said was he was like, let me go. If you let me go, then I can go, because I have a lot of work to do. And it was just very apparent that part of the script, they didn't tell them what to say. It was very clear that they just rolled the cameras and they were like, okay, now say something in your language. They're like, what do you want me to say? Just say something. It was very improv. But it would be interesting to know what some of the other languages were. If you guys recognized any of the other languages, I guess you could leave a comment in this video. It's going to be unlisted, but I'll still read them. So let me know if you recognize some of the other languages. It also kind of showed the strong brotherhood of that ship. I don't know, I guess you couldn't really call it a brotherhood, because shit went down on that ship. So like they're protecting each other. So I don't really know if it's so much a brotherhood as people just covering their asses. So let me get this straight. If I'm correct, they were drinking, playing games, gambling. Some of them hit it big, and they knew that they had girls on board that were going to be sold into sex trafficking, and they decided to take advantage of them early, and the girls didn't like that, and I think there was a struggle, and they beat one up and she died, and so they threw her overboard, but of course all these other girls are witnesses, so in a panic he crushed the air hole and they all died. I think that's what happened. I was kind of rewatching this episode kind of at a faster pace. I had it on in the background, so let me know if I got that right. I'm pretty sure that's kind of what happened. But anyways, shit went down on that ship, and they're covering each other. They're not going to speak. And Bunk and Lester are trying everything they can. And one of my favorite scenes in this episode is when McNulty comes in, when he's like, oh, these were murders. I gotta, like he comes in on high and mighty. He's like, guys, I solved it. And Lester and Bunk just put him in his place. It was such a good scene because, it was also kind of a self-aware scene because that's kind of how a typical cop drama would be scripted. It's like two characters having trouble solving a crime, and then a third unrelated character comes in and he's like, no, I have all the pieces. And then like, they figure it out from there. So I thought it was a really good clapback at McNulty, because he's a pretentious little shit sometimes. So it was a good clapback scene, but also a good self-aware scene of how, typical cop dramas are scripted. Later on, with this whole missing girl thing, they're trying to figure out addresses, everything they can, until they finally got those FBI agents involved. And So they said there were 50,000 unregistered women working in the United States, and they get manipulated into sex trafficking with, they're trying to come to America and they tell them that they're going for one thing, and obviously it turns out to be something completely different, which is horrific. That's nightmarish. And they said one girl is worth about $500,000 of yearly revenue. And it's just messed up, man. It's just messed up to think that something like that exists, like especially in America. And you just think of this as just a first world country, and how could a sex trafficking ring of that magnitude exist right under our noses? But of course, as we find out later on in the season, when McNulty kind of goes undercover, how he had to first they had to stake out some John, and then from him he got this card with a number on it, and then they had to call it and convince that person. So it's like people will figure out how to work in the shadows, and it's insane what exists out there that we don't know anything about. We meet Nikki's ex-wife. I guess they're divorced now, right? And I don't know, Nikki's kind of just trying his best this episode. Obviously he's I think this was the episode where he's kind of turning to a darker side, because like so far he's just been stealing on like a, I guess, relatively smaller scale, but this episode they really went for it and they stole just a whole truck full of goods. So you can see his crime escalating and his desperation escalating, causing him to make poorer and poorer decisions. And I think his ex-wife and kid is obviously a big factor in that. One of the kind of the jarring things about Nick, though, is we saw his not so glamorous side. Obviously, he's throwing the N-word around just like very casually. So, he's a little racist and homophobic. The way he was talking in the barbershop when she was like, "You want a little purple in there?" And then, he said what he said. So he's homophobic. He's a little racist, which really, it's realistic, but it especially the racism thing, just how casually he's throwing around the N-word, it really sucks, because it'd be one thing if he grew up in like a completely all-white community and he never met any black people or dealt with black people, and he grew up with these like racist misconceptions or, these stereotypes that live in his head. But literally, there are black people working for his father. There are black stevedores, and so he does see black people and he is friends with black people, and he's still throwing that word around so casually. And that's kind of a big face of racism. Is like we always think about racism as like the most extreme thing, like white supremacy, KKK, crosses on fire. We always associate the most extreme things with racism, but a lot of it exists casually, like this. And when it happens around you, you gotta do what you can to step in and be like, yo, bro, that's not okay. That's not cool. And that's easier said than done, because I'm a not very confrontational person, and there have been times when, somebody said something not so good, and I failed to act because I didn't want that confrontation in the moment. But I failed to say, hey, bro, that's not okay. But, and I think about that moment, and it really sucks. Like, I really wish I would have said something. But that's the point, right? It's like a lot of racism exists on a casual level where we could have a conversation about it. It's just like it requires you to, one, step up and step outside of your comfort zone and be willing to take that stand. But, the fact that I failed to act in that one moment, I carry that, and I just, the next time it happens, the company I keep, we're all good people. I don't hang out with anybody of questionable morale. But if it ever happened again, if I ever had the opportunity to step in and say like, yo, bro, that's not okay. So I would definitely do it. So that's the best thing we can do is step in when we can, but that's easier said than done. I don't want to sound like a moral authority on any of these things, but that's just my opinion on it. And let's just continue with Micky and Ziggy's storyline. So like I said, they stole all those cameras, stole the truck full of stuff, and they were haggling with Gleekus. And, for all this shit that we want to talk about Ziggy actually came through here because he did his research on how much those cameras are worth, and he was able to get a better price. So it's really because of Ziggy that they made the money that they did, because Micky was about to settle for a much less price, like half of what it was really worth. And so I found it surprising that Ziggy actually came through here. And when he's in the bar celebrating about it, we'll get there because that also has Frank in the equation. But Ziggy came through this episode. He made some money for him and Micky. Valchek and Frank's beef is obviously growing. They stole the surveillance van, and the surveillance van is going around the world now. And this just shows abuse of power on Sabatka's side as well. And it got me to thinking that Valchek and Sabatka are actually a lot more alike than we might think. I feel like they're kind of two sides of the same coin because they both abuse their power. They both have personal agendas that they use their power to achieve. It's just, Valchek, he's just beefing about a stained glass window, which, is an important symbol because as we come to find out, this church is visited by some very high-level players in the city, some move makers, some people that can have a significant difference in something that you might want to achieve. And so having that window, having that symbol there keeps them, or keeps you on their mind every time they look at it. So there is a lot of value in that window, and I get why he wants it there. But meanwhile, Frank's agenda is he just wants to make things better for his stevedores and his union. But they're both abusing their power to achieve their personal agendas. Especially Frank just has the power to put a surveillance van in a container and just send it around the world. It's crazy, but it kind of made me realize that Frank and Valchek are a lot more alike than I might have thought. And speaking of Valchek, he kind of gets a reality check this episode, especially with Presbeluski letting him know everything that went down with the Barksdale case and how much bigger that could have been. And of course, Valchek goes and talks shit to Burrell because he finds out exactly what happened, and he has that leverage over him now. And so now you know what's going to happen. Daniels, he's down there in the pit in the evidence locker about to quit but Valchek's about to pull him back in, you know? So I mean, obviously. So it's just crazy how everything's connecting. But Valchek actually kind of came through this episode also, even though he's doing this out of his personal agenda. He just improved the unit, you know. So now we're gonna get the boys back together, the team back together, if you will, slowly. So Valchek kind of came through this episode. As bad of a police as he is, he has his moments. Okay, so let's now talk about Stringer and Tealman. Stringer is, Tealman's become a problem, and he's got to go. So Stringer is hatching a plan. He's watching him. We find out Tealman's getting his product from Blind Butchie, another big player that we meet. And Tealman's pretty good with Butchie, man. Seems like there's a good amount of trust there, and obviously that trust wavers fast when money and politics comes into question. And this whole episode, we've been seeing evidence of loyalty as an illusion, and this is one of the minor ones. Obviously Tealman's ultimately just a customer to Blind Butchie, even though he's a consistent customer, but he doesn't have any problem letting him go. And we'll get to the other examples. But I thought the scene with Junk, the dog, and the rat was a really good scene because, Tealman's like, how the hell does he know what the rat's going to do? And that's just a metaphor for how Stringer has been watching him and he's observing. Junk is a street dog. He's out there. He's observing. This isn't the first rat he's come across. He's studied them. So he knows exactly what the rat is going to do. Just like Stringer is following Tealman around, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. He knows exactly how he's going to react to certain situations and things. And so just a really, really good, visual storytelling and a really good scene. And another interesting thing about Stringer, he's getting a little pretentious himself too, because he's talking about the investing in the cell phone companies, the Motorola and all that. Again, with the product placement, a lot of product placement, a lot more than I realized. But anyways, Stringer, he's talking to them, and he's like talking about market saturation. And as soon as he said market saturation, he was just like kind of looking to him for approval. And then when they didn't say anything, he was just like, these guys don't even know about market saturation. And it's just funny, like, he's got a little bit of education on him now, a little bit of higher learning, and now all of a sudden he's looking down at the people that he hangs out with on a daily basis. And it's just funny, like education tends to make some people a little pretentious. Here's the other examples of loyalty as an illusion. Is like one, Stringer going to Dee's ex-wife and giving her a pep talk about how she's got to go visit him and make sure he's doing okay and make sure he stays quiet. And then they end up having sex. It's like, okay, all right. So that loyalty is only there for self-preservation. And as soon as self-preservation is threatened, loyalty goes out the window. Even Avon talking to Dee in the library about, hey man, you're doing drugs and I know, and I'm just looking out for you. And hey, I got you this job in this library. Hey, if you just stay quiet, who knows what could happen for you. And it's complex because he's coming from a place of love because that's his family. So I know he cares about him, but ultimately it's for self-preservation. Even asking him to lay off the drugs because Avon knew what he was going to do that night. He knew exactly what was about to happen. So he was saving Dee. But it's like, do you really care that he's addicted and into drugs? Or were you just telling him to lay off because you knew what was about to happen? Like, do you really care, or do you only care out of self-preservation? Or can it be both things? It's very complex because from Avon's perspective, that's his family. So he does care. I believe that he really does love and care about Dee. But that care is also going to take care of a lot of self-preservation things. It's going to keep Dee quiet. It's going to keep him docile. And then from Dee's perspective, it's like, bro, your love is fake. The only reason you care is because you don't want me to talk. And it's just, I think the relationship between Avon and Dee is the most complex portrayal of loyalty and the illusion of loyalty, because it's like Avon does care, but it's out of self-preservation. So does that count? Does that caring count? Can it be both things? I don't know. Even with Frank, Frank is kind of barely holding on to his crew. And the guy goes up to him and he's like, hey man, I think I might have to quit here. There's just not enough work. And Frank tells him to go get a shot in a beer. And of course, the bartender hands him a wad of money. That's also manipulation, like, does Frank really care that he's doing bad, or does he want to just keep him around to keep his numbers up? Because if word goes around that people are quitting Frank's crew, things are going to fall apart fast. But the thing is, I do believe that Frank cares. Frank absolutely cares. He's doing everything he can to keep things alive politically and just in his crew. He's doing all kinds of dirt for his people and, his self-preservation as well. But it's just a very complex portrayal of loyalty, because it's both out of care but all simultaneously for self-preservation as well. Obviously, one of the best scenes is the lobbying scene in this episode. Frank is getting schooled on how to lobby and who to lobby with. And he's having the conversation with the guy about dredging and core engineering surveys, and he's like, look, I don't care what the surveys say, the truth is. And then he gets cut off. But there's a lot to unpack there, because it's like politicians need data to work with, and they're going to get that data from surveys and studies, but it's easy to manipulate studies and surveys, and so surveys are not always indicative of what's really happening. And that's what Frank is talking about. It's like, hey, I don't care what the survey says, I live this shit on a daily basis, and the truth is not what's on paper for you. But Frank is a nobody. Nobody's gonna listen to him or give a shit about what he's talking about. And it's just the one guy who is actually interested in talking to him, his lobbyist pulls Frank aside and he's like, bro, you're wasting your time with that guy. We already got his vote. The people you need to work is over here. Clay Davis. Can you imagine Frank trying to have a conversation about dredging with Clay Davis? Like, Clay Davis is going to give an absolute fuck about what he has to say. Clay Davis is only interested in the money. They've already given him $40,000, and all that gets him is a hello. And it's just, and the subtle language of political corruption, where Clay Davis is like, yeah, you guys have been doing some great contributions lately. Hope it stays that way. It's so grimy. And what's also amazing about this show is Baltimore is a Democratic city. Clay Davis is a Democratic politician, I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he's a portrayal of a Democratic politician. And what does the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party is always associated with, they're always about the people. Like, people need to have good living conditions, fair wages, all these things. And yet you see the state of Baltimore and the decay in Baltimore. How could a democratic city be this bad? It's because corruption exists on both sides. Politicians are corrupt, period. Now, there's a lot of complexities with corruption in and of itself, and we're going to explore that next season. There's different levels of corruption too, but I love that this is a portrayal of a democratic city, because that's the party that's always like, yeah, we're gonna fix stuff. Well, are you? It really just teaches you not to fall too hard on either side of the fence. Like, do your research, man. Like, more so than the president, it's your local government that has more of an impact on your daily life, and those are the people that we often overlook, because the news, local elections aren't really hot items for the media. You know what I mean? I mean, we see all the ads and stuff that come around that time, but I don't feel like nearly, myself included, I've only just now recently kind of started paying attention to my local government, but that's super important, way more important than, the Senate and the Congress and the president. So we need to pay more attention to that. But anyways, I kind of lost track there. Clay Davis is grimy. Frank is barely holding on to his crew, but he happens to hold on to his crew. And the last thing, one of the last things that happens in the episode is Ziggy at the bar, kind of enjoying himself and enjoying his day. He's like, I made money today. And then his dad comes to completely shit on his parade without even being there. You know, he sees him, the guy, get the wad of money, and the bartender's like, it's from Frank. And then Ziggy's just like, and it's just, you know, Ziggy and Frank's story is really tragic. It's just a lack of communication, a lack of understanding each other. And Ziggy, he's got potential, but he lacks people skills in a very big way. But he has potential. I mean, he did his research with those cameras, and he made more money than they were gonna make. So he came through this episode, and you know, I don't know. I feel like he had enough to celebrate there. But and of course, you know what happens later on. The hot shots, the heroin that was, or the cocaine. I don't know if they were doing heroin or cocaine in the prison, but it's laced with the rat poison. People end up dying, including Dee's friend, who they were kind of bonding over the comic books. The guy that liked the comic books, he ended up taking one of those hot shots. So I'm assuming that he was one of the people that was killed. And that sucks, because that's another blow for Dee's morale, is maybe the one actual friend he was going to make in prison, like a genuine connection. They were having good rapport, and it seems like they were going to be, you know, good friends, and now he's dead. So, and again, obviously due to Avon. So Avon can care all he wants, but Dee is just not. I mean, Dee has every right to not trust or want to be around Avon, and it sucks. And you know, that last shot of, you know, Avon just chilling there reading his book, it's crazy. It's crazy. This was a really packed episode. There was a lot to talk about in this episode. So very, very awesome. Loved it. Let's move on to 2x4. Okay, so The Wire 2x4. Let's talk about it. So Frank's pretty pissed about what Nikki and Zig did, and he's, you know, yelling at Nikki in the beginning, and he's kind of also explaining why Baltimore is surviving the way it is right now, because their shipping yard, he said, is like a day out of the way for you know, other docks that are more convenient to get to. But the reason they trust them is because they're honest, and they work hard, and they work fast, which I'm like, you've definitely been stealing a lot of stuff the whole time, but I guess it's been, you know, on a small scale, like steal a few things off of containers, don't make entire containers go disappear, which sounds like is what used to happen a lot back in the day, back in Frank's day, or maybe Frank's dad's day, but he said we're not back in the old days anymore. So this was a pretty high-risk maneuver by Nikki. Meanwhile, with the prison, the aftermath of the hot shots, 5 dead, including Dee's, I guess, friend, and 8 in the infirmary. So a lot of people were affected, but it seemed random, right? Avon played this one really fucking smart. And this is just such a smart play by Avon, because it accomplishes so many things. And he's, again, using this as a means to try to look out for Dee, but obviously Dee sees right through it. But what a smart play, man. What a smart play to take down Tillman, who's been a problem for you, and use that to shave years off of your sentence, which is exactly what he's going to try to do. And Levy is just such a snake, dude. He's so snaky. And he is obviously setting up that deal with the prison, and the prison is happy to take it, because this is a huge, it's going to be in the media. People are going to be talking about this. This isn't going to go, like, unanswered. So that's what sucks, man. After all that time, spending all that time on the Barksdale case, he might get away on some prison drama. And man, you gotta hand it to Avon, man. He's crafty. He is crafty. It's just Dee is just not about that anymore, and he wants to just be left alone, because he sees through it. Because it's like, yeah, Avon is doing stuff to care for him and to make things easier on him, but it's all out of self-preservation, and Dee is just sick and tired of that, so you can't blame him either for just wanting to be left alone. And yeah, man, Avon is just really, really smart for that one. Really, really smart for that one. Going back to Nick and Ziggy, obviously they made a good amount of money, and Ziggy is already flaunting it with a $2,000 Italian leather jacket. Like, Ziggy is just, it's so frustrating to talk about Ziggy, man, because he's smart. He has moments, they got a lot more money from this deal because of Ziggy for having done the research on the cameras. But then at the same time, he just doesn't listen. Like, Nikki was just like, hey, man, don't flash your money, because we live in a poor community and we're not supposed to have this much money unless it came from a dirty place. So be smart. Just don't flash your money. And Ziggy's like, yeah, dude, totally. I hear you. That makes sense. And then he buys a $2,000 jacket. It's just like, what are you doing? He's so frustrating. He is his own problem. And he ends up paying for it. He's got beef with Maui, who spills the coffee all over his drink. And honestly, it's well deserved. Like, Ziggy, what are you doing, dude? Like, okay, cool, man. You made some money. Like, don't flash it around in front of people, because not only is that just disrespectful to them, having to break their backs doing an honest day's work, but you're also giving up the fact that you're doing dirt. And he's Frank's son, who is the leader of the union. It's just like, Ziggy just doesn't know how to navigate, man. He just doesn't really think about anything but himself in any given situation. It's really frustrating to watch. Meanwhile, the team is kind of coming back together. The scene with Daniels and Burrell. Burrell is bringing Daniels back in, and Daniels has the upper hand this time. He's like, fuck me once, shame on you. Fuck me twice. And that was a really funny line. But here we go. Daniels is back in it, and he can pick his own team. And, it's the team slowly coming back together. It's awesome. It's awesome. Even though this is a complete 180 from what he discussed, with his wife earlier in the season about leaving and going back to law school, and then him pulling Kima back in, and she's also got similar problems with Cheryl, and it's like Kima said, like, if I hear the music, I'm gonna dance. So I imagine that's gonna cause some problems. We'll see. But the band's back together. We're coming back together, and it's awesome. It's awesome. I love it. McNulty's personal life is in shambles. That shot of him in his apartment in his underwear, drinking beer, listening to his messages. Like, he can't find Omar. He's got the whole divorce thing going on. Rhonda's on his back about something. He's got a pile of laundry. It was just a really nice, it's just panning out, showing just more and more collapse around McNulty, and his personal life is just in shambles, and he's depressed, and kind of reclusing away from his responsibilities, because he wants to be, he is murder police at the end of the day, and he's just not where he wants to be right now. But McNulty is trying where he can, he still cares about this case. He took that letter to the Russian lady, and we kind of found a few contextual clues. This dead girl probably had a child back home, so you can just kind of imagine the circumstances. This woman came here, to America, the land of opportunity, and she was probably told one thing, and it turned into something else entirely. And it's a very, very dark season. Hey, that was a weird cut. I'm so sorry. I rolled out of bed and started recording these, and I just realized after a certain point, I'm way too tired to do this right now. So I thought I would step away and come back after I had a little bit more energy, after I'd woken up a little bit. I was missing my coffee. So anyways, let's pick up where I left off with 2x4, which I don't exactly remember where that was. So this one might be kind of all over the place, but hey, we're gonna keep moving along. So I think I was talking about Stringer. He's just losing grip on the pit. The product is shit. The junkies are not interested in it anymore. They're moving on to greener pastures, I guess. They're moving on to the east side. And I think I forgot to mention, when the team is getting back together, obviously Daniels can pick his own team, and he has that talk with Rawls, and Rawls is ready to give up everybody except McNulty. He just absolutely hates McNulty. He quits or he drowns, I think is what he said. And the only thing Rawls is interested in is clearing those murders, the 14 Jane Does. And there were some really good quotes in this episode, especially pertaining to Daniels. So I notice every time a character is watching something on television, it's always very, very relevant to the story or that particular character. So Daniels, after he's done talking with Rawls and he fills his wife in on what's going on, he's watching the Westminster Dog Show. And there's some interesting quotes where they're talking about the loyalty of the dog and how it has to submit to an owner, submit to a master. And the quote was, "To perform at this level, the animal has to follow orders without question." And that's kind of where Daniels is right now. But he kind of has a second chance, too. Like, Daniels doesn't really need to take this as seriously as the Barksdale case. He just needs to make Valchek happy. And he could be back in the running to leave with a good pension and set himself and Marla up for the retirement. So I totally get why, he's going back into it. It's kind of like that moment from The Godfather. It's like, just when I was out, they pulled me back in. And this, the episode was mostly just our favorite characters getting back together to do another big case, and it's really exciting, man. They all work so well together. The on-camera chemistry is so awesome. No matter what character you pair with each other, they just work so well on camera together. For Daniels, helping Prez out last season when he covered for him, when Prez pistol whipped that kid and made him half blind, Daniels had to cover for him, and he felt really shitty about that. But now it's kind of paying off because Prez was able to put in a good word about Daniels and have him requested by name from Valchek. So it's like the cause and effect of these decisions that the characters make. Like, Daniels made a really shitty decision to cover for a really shitty person, but since then Prez has had tremendous development and growth, and I really like him now, and it kind of came full circle, and there was some good karma at the end. But that kid is still half blind, the pistol whip kid, so take that as you will. And Nick is also getting more desperate, man. He's getting a taste for this easy money now, and you can see him becoming more and more reckless. He's stealing bigger and bigger scores, and I just thought him trying to buy that house with his ex on the bridge when they're talking about it, that was a good scene, because Nick is doing doc trivia with his daughter. He's like, hey, what's that ship called? Or what's that thing called? And what's that thing called? And she's right on top of it. She knows everything about it. I didn't see too many female stevedores in this season, but I'm sure that female dock workers exist. Maybe there are not so many of them. But the fact that Nick's daughter knew everything about the docks and stuff, I feel like that was kind of portraying that generational complacency. Like my father's father was a stevedore, my father's father was a stevedore. So who knows, maybe Nick's daughter might have grown up to become a stevedore or been involved in that life somewhere. That's how it happens. You live in a life and you want to teach your kids what that's all you're going to be able to teach them, but you kind of have to let them be their own people too. And when Bunk and B show up to the docks, you hear the dock workers start whistling. And it's kind of like in season 1 when the cops showed up to the pit. Everybody was like, 5-0, 5-0, shut it down, shut it down. And so the stevedores have their own secret language when the cops show up. And you see that they're not afraid of them. They're not afraid of the cops. The dock workers know their law inside and out as much as they need to as well. And they're not afraid of them at all. And speaking of B, we got some character development with her when she was in the car with Lester and Bunk, and they were just talking about her past. She used to be she used to work at a toll booth collecting change, and the money wasn't so good there, and she happened to see an ad for this dock worker security guard position, and it paid $33,000 a year with benefits. And B has a kid, has a father, hasn't been there for at least 3 years. I think she had a little bit of a fling with Maui. I don't know if Maui is the father or if that was just like a fling she had, but obviously she's kind of striking out in the relationship department, so she's just doing what she has to do. And Bunk even asked her, he's like, did you even want to be police? And she was just like, I guess. It just shows that, you know, a lot of people that become, maybe not like full-on police, but security guards, you know, that's not as intense as police work, but people just do what they have to do, and they fall into jobs that they need to fall into to be able to support themselves, whether they want to be there or not, which is depressing to think about. But you see her coming into her own throughout this season. Like, she picks up very quickly. She's a quick learner. She's an out of the box thinker. And she's had quite a bit of growth in just these few episodes, I would say. And I think we kind of already talked about Tillman getting set up, but, you know, while they were discussing, while Levy and Avon were in there trying to cut years for him, I think one of the cops was like, do you have any proof for this? And obviously, you know, he led them to Tillman, the setup he got. But one of the quotes they said at that meeting is, then we make the case that's there for us to make, meaning we have enough pieces to fit the picture and the narrative that we need to get out of this mess. Let's just leave it there. We don't need to look any further. We don't need to exhaust any more man hours on this. This is good enough. That is unfortunately how the law works sometimes. And, you know, in this case, all parties are guilty. Like, Tillman is definitely supplying drugs, so he's not like a saint. But a lot of innocent people go to jail because of mentality like this. We make the case that's there for us to make. Whether it's the truth or not, we got enough pieces that fit the narrative. So, job's done. Oh, we didn't talk about Bubbles. Bubbles is just out being Bubbles, shoplifting, Sony Walkman product placement, digital camera product placement, just, you know, technology blast from the past. And it's just funny, man. Like, digital cameras were just coming around, and it's, you know, I just always get a chuckle out of Micky always being like, whoa, oh, technology, what? And Bubbles just out being Bubbles, you know, stealing stuff. But he listened to McNulty for some reason. I don't think he really had to, you know, but he was like, okay, fine, I'll find Omar for you. Because I think that Omar also feels his own guilt for how close he got to being clean and how much McNulty and especially Kima helped him out in season 1, and he let that kind of go to waste, and now his habits are worse than ever before. So, you know, like Bubble said, it's the tax you got to pay. So I think he's doing that out of some sense of guilt, and I don't know, man. Hopefully that works out for him. But that's kind of it for this episode. You know, Bunk and Lester and everybody showed up, and they were sizing everybody up at the bar, and then they let Frank know, hey, man, this is a homicide situation now. And then you see Frank freaking out because he's like way in over his head. And it is what it is. We'll see how it goes from here. So we're going to move on to 2X5. I'm so sorry if this one was a little disjointed. I had to cut in the middle, but we'll keep it continuing. So let's move on to 2X5. All right, 2X5, let's talk about it. Undertow. Let's just talk about all of Ziggy's stuff right off the bat. Ziggy's, he's too much of a punk to be out here trying to sling drugs, man. Like, he just gets straight punked by everybody. I think he needs to pick a different, like, you know, something a little bit more chill. He needs to pick a different line of work because he got punked on his own corner, which is like, you don't recover from that. And Method Man comes out of nowhere as Cheese. I totally forgot he was in the show. Perfect addition. Method Man is a really good actor, and he plays the part well. And of course, you know, the whole shenanigans over the car being burnt. And it's just really, Ziggy gets an opportunity, sometimes succeeds, makes money, blows it right away, or goes buys another package to try to flip it into more. Obviously, he doesn't have, you know, like the testosterone to be able to run shit like it's supposed to be run. And so he's always having Micky have to come to his rescue. And this time it got so bad that literally the Greeks had to come to his rescue. And this is where we kind of find out the Prop Joe connection also. And everything worked out in the end, but it could have ended up much worse. But I think my favorite quote was from Prop Joe, where he was like, "Fool, if it wasn't for Sergey over here, you and your cuz would have been cadaverous motherfuckers." And that's one of the best Prop Joe quotes. And I don't know, man, what is there to say about Ziggy that hasn't already been said? He's just a fuck up, and he's just continuing to fuck up this episode. One really interesting thing I learned about James Ransone. I don't know. It's Ransone or Ransoni. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I learned some things about him, man. He actually got addicted to heroin in like real life, not during this show. So this was one of his first major acting gigs. And a lot of people thought that he was addicted to heroin just because of how skinny he was. And he said that he came on the set and he just tried to play the character as comically ridiculous as possible. That's why he's so like, almost seems like a Looney Tunes character at times. But this, obviously, he played the part so well that it still follows him to this day. And people still call him Ziggy. And it's, nobody likes Ziggy. So I can only imagine being associated with a role like that. But what's tragic is a couple years after doing this part, he got addicted to prescription pain pills. I was reading one of his interviews, and he used to kind of scam doctors into giving him like prescriptions. He would just find ways to get his fix of prescription pills until his friends started getting arrested left and right. And, doing stuff like that is a federal felony, so it's like some serious jail time. So at that point, he's already addicted and he needs that next fix. So he was like, you know what? I'm just going to start doing heroin because it was easier to procure. It was easier to come by. And what I found was interesting is he said that James Ransone in real life, he said he actually has more respect for a heroin dealer than he does for the pharmaceutical industry, because at least a heroin dealer is going to be straight with you and tell you exactly what you're getting. Like, hey, this is heroin. I'm selling you heroin. But he says that the pharmaceutical industry is a lot more deceptive, and they, you have all these doctors telling you, hey, take this and you'll feel better, when really they're just making money off of it, and that thing that they're telling you to take is also highly addictive. He said in his own words that he feels like the pharmaceutical company found a way to legalize heroin, and now we have an opioid epidemic. And I had no idea he went through all that. It's very tragic. Good news, happy news at the end. He did turn it around. I don't know where he's at today or how he's like today. Hopefully he stayed clean. But yeah, man, that was crazy to learn that he actually got addicted to heroin. And I just wonder how much this role played into that, if at all. It's just crazy having this kind of role and being on this kind of show and then going through that in real life. So it doesn't matter if you're a celebrity or just an average Joe, like, addiction can get anybody, and that's the I mean, honestly, celebrities are probably more susceptible because they have money, but it's just crazy. No matter where you're from, no matter what walk of life you come from, no one's safe. And it was a pretty heavy read, the interview. So I'm glad he made it out and he's doing better. And as much as we hate to, or as much as we love to shit on Ziggy's character, you got to commend James Ransone for really owning that part and just playing it the way he did. And it's a really, really good, memorable performance, whether you like the character or not. And that's kind of it, man. That's kind of all I'm going to talk about, Ziggy and Cheese. Everything kind of worked out there. Daniels is bringing Carver into the mix now. And Carver's like, why? Why me? And Daniels is like, well, if I caught you once, you might be the last son of a bitch to try it twice. And he was referring to like when he tried to, or when he was a snitch for Burrell last season. And I feel like Daniels has an admiration for Carver. It's another one of those kind of like father-son parallels. I feel like Carver reminds Daniels a lot of himself as a younger man. So it's just, it's nice to have Carver back on the team. Bubbles goes out to meet McNulty, and he's eyeballing that grill, and he's like, "Oh, this is a top of the line grill. It's chained. I'll be back for that. I'll be back for that." You know, when he gives up the information, McNulty hands him a 20, and he's like, "Bro, come on, all this? Like, I had a shotgun in my face. Like, what are you doing over here?" And, you know, he's hustling McNulty out of more money. These are just signs of his addiction having come back stronger. Like, he's eyeballing every piece of scrap metal he sees because he's like, money. I can steal that. I can make money. And it's just, it really sucks, man. Addiction is like a horrific animal. Like, every time somebody relapses, it comes back worse. So, you know, Bubbles is still kind of living his tragedy. And Nicky gets a nice dose of a reality check when he goes back and checks out his aunt's house, and the whole area's been gentrified, and the property is worth so much more now, and McNulty's wife is the realtor. There's, you know, this big gentrification boom, not just in Baltimore, but all over the United States. If you remember, I think we're in about 2003 now at where the show is at this time. And if you recall back to 2008 and the big housing bubble crash, this is kind of the beginnings of it. This is the inception of it, where, you know, there was like a big housing boom everywhere. Prices were, you know, dirt cheap, not cheap enough for Nicky to afford a house, but it's just crazy to see this scene and many other scenes with Elena being a realtor and talking about, I think in the next episode she's talking to a couple. We'll talk about it, but this is the beginnings of the housing bubble crash. And obviously Nicky's got a reality check now, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to sell a few more things. And speaking of a few more things to sell, the Greeks are interested in chemicals now. That's what they want. They want chemicals, and Nicky is very curious as to why. And him and Ziggy look it up later on MSN browser, another blast from the past. And again, Nicky's like, so you just type a question in there and it just gives you an answer? This was before Google was like Google, you know what I mean? We had MSN, Ask Jeeves, Yahoo, freaking, I don't know, man. There were so many of those kinds of sites that is essentially just Google now. And they find out it is for drugs. It's likely for cocaine. When he goes and talks to the Greeks about it, he's like, hey, I looked it up. Let me just make sure here. It's not for a bomb, right? Oh, it's for drugs? Okay, that's cool. As long as it's not for a bomb. Like, that was his concern, is they might have been trying to make some kind of bomb, because again, 9/11 just happened. It's very fresh in the country's mind. Homeland security is ramping up, counterterrorism. We're talking about terrorists in the news like every single day. So that kind of stuff is on everybody's mind. So I thought that was like a nice detail. It's something reasonable for him to be kind of iffy about, like, chemicals? What do you guys need chemicals for? Again, I just love the scenes where the team is back together. Daniels is quarterbacking. It's Herc's time to shine now, because they're going after a lot of the dealers that are white. You know, they're going after Mike or Mikey. So it's Herc's time to shine undercover, and honestly, he does pretty well, I gotta say. And when Daniels is quarterbacking, he's, you know, everybody's asking about, like, what's Frank done, or why are we chasing Frank? And Prez fires back. He's like, because my father-in-law hates his guts, and that counts for probable cause in southeastern or southwestern, wherever he said. So again, we're on this case. We're finding things out. There's definitely crime happening, but this all happened on a hunch from Valchek, because he was pissy. And they're doing what they can, right? They're going to Sabatka, they're slapping subpoenas on everybody, and they're not afraid of these subpoenas at all. So, like, the loyalty runs deep in the brotherhood of the stevedores. And like I said, they know their laws. He's like, yeah, fine, okay, fine. You want subpoenas? Fine. We're going to go in there, and we're not going to say shit. And no one's going to say shit about anybody else, because that's how things are done here. And Stringer's business class was really interesting, because they were talking about WorldCom and changing the name of the product or service if you're, not doing so well like Stringer is. So I thought that was a really interesting concept, which was later paralleled when you see them changing the sign of this. I think it was the DOJ, but it was the immigration and naturalization, and they changed that to Homeland Security. Again, we're pumping all of our resources at this point in America into Homeland Security and counterterrorism, and it's just ironic that the Department for Immigration and Naturalization is changed to Homeland Security. So like the department that was helping immigrants become citizens is now actively not fighting against those people, but we were definitely not letting people into this country just willy-nilly anymore. A lot of things changed, and it was harder than ever to become a citizen. It was already a very tough and long process, and now it had become even tougher. So like Homeland Security, immigration, it's like completely opposite things, but that's what happened. And it was interesting where the guy was talking to McNulty, looks back at the sign, he's like, feel any different? So I don't know if that was a parallel with the whole change the name thing, but it felt that way. Omar's deposition was a pretty good scene. He's just telling them the details about Bird and what he can do for them and what kind of witness he can be. And I don't think he's telling the whole truth. It's like a half truth, but whatever. Like they said last episode, we will make the case that there is for us to make, and they have Omar, and that's a pretty big piece to the narrative that they need, so they're going to go for it. And he gets a voucher for some court clothes, and she says anything with a tie. So we'll come back to that. And I'm not sure what conversation this fell under. I think it was when Spiros was talking to Nikki. Oh yeah, they were talking about the chemicals, and Frank is really insistent on wanting to meet the Greek, which we haven't met, or they haven't met yet. And Spiros is, they're just talking about the chemicals, and he's like, it's just business, man, it's just business. Buy for a nickel, sell for a dime. And who does Spiros work with? Prop Joe. And what does Prop Joe always say? Buy for $1, sell for $2. So you can see these men have similar philosophies, and they're just strictly business, and they don't want to deal with any additional bullshit if they can avoid it. So you can see why Prop Joe probably fucks with Spiros. And then Nikki goes, who wants a dime's worth of fucking chemicals? And it's kind of a double meaning there, because dime is a street term for, like a dime bag is a $10 bag. Usually referring to weed as I know it, but I'm sure that people sell dime bags of heroin. So it's exactly what he says. He's like, who wants a dime bag worth of chemicals? And Spiros just gives him a look. He's like, the city? Like the whole city, essentially. So it was just an ironic line for him to say. It's like, everybody wants a dime bag of chemicals, if only you knew. And man, McNulty is doing some legwork to try to solve this crime, because he just feels this inner guilt to want to help this nameless person, and he's taking long trips on his own time. So again, he's good police, man. He just is. He's maybe not a good person, but he's good police. And B is doing what she can on her front, using Maui as her informant to kind of get some clues on how to proceed, using his vulnerability against him, because he's like, oh, she came knocking to my door. Hey, I got beers. I got vodka. You want some vodka? But he gives up some clues. It's like, hey, everything's in the computer. We have digital records. It's all there. So now they have an avenue on how to tackle this case. So that was a big tip. Meanwhile, with Dee and Stringer and Donette, I think that's his ex-wife's name, right? Dee's ex-wife. She's in prison doing what she was told to do. Go talk to Dee and, hey, it's fine. Everything's fine. We're getting paid for it. They're going to take care of us. And Dee's just over it. He's over it. Like, nothing feels genuine to him anymore. No one in his own family feels genuine to him anymore. And he just really wants to be left alone. And I think had he just been left alone, that everything would have been fine. But you can literally see the wheels spinning in Stringer's head about like, oh God, Dee's a problem. and we're gonna have to do something about it. And he decides to make that call on his own, and that's going to have some really serious consequences. But you can see the foreshadowing of what eventually happens. Oh, speaking of foreshadowing, I guess when Ziggy's car was burning, when Cheese burned his car, they do a close up on the back plate, and on the license plate it says "Happiness is being Ziggy," and it melts and it just falls into the fire. So some more foreshadowing about bad things coming. And String is talking to Avon, trying to convince him that, hey, we might need to go through Prop Joe and do this. Obviously, Avon is not having it yet, but the seeds are kind of being sown for a little bit of a conflict, a little bit of a disagreement on how to proceed and how to run things, and you can kind of see that progressing. Meanwhile, Stringer wants to put some real estate in Dee's name, so he has something to come back to. Well, spoiler alert, that never happens. Spiros goes to meet Frank. Frank is pissed because he wanted to meet the Greek, but ultimately he's like, dude, I'm out. This is not for me. This is too much. I am out. And then Spiros goes, oh, really? Because we were going to start paying you double. So it's like money always talks, especially to Frank, who needs all the money he can get so he can lobby for his people, so he can make things better. And it sucks. You can see Frank trying to not be part of this life anymore, but it's not difficult to tempt him. You mentioned money, especially with the chemicals that they try to steal later. The Greeks are paying triple the rate per container. Frank's not gonna say no to that. So money talks. Money always keeps people on the hook. And Spiro says to Frank, they used to make steel there, no? And again, just talking about the industrial collapse of Baltimore and what it's come to, and it's a dying industry that moved on to other places, man. And it's just the evolution of things to come, and there's gonna be losers in that evolution. And I think Frank is among those people. And we see Stringer taking everything he's learned in his classes and passing it on to Bodie and everybody else. And man, they were kind of coming up with some creative things there. Change up the caps, make them different colors, and then start some fake competition within the towers. And that's secretly they're all on the same team, but that competition creates demand. It's like, oh no, this corner's got it. No, this corner's got it, and that's gonna create buzz. It's really smart. It's exactly what businesses do sometimes to promote their products, but we're seeing real world business tactics being used in like a drug kingpin environment, and it's just crazy to see Stringer taking what he's learned and applying it here. So the man is smart. He's doing what he can with what he has, which is not much, but he's doing what he can. He's changing the name. He's doing the WorldCom strategy. And so, where McNulty goes to, he's going to see those women that are locked up and see if they can recognize anybody in the picture. And you hear them speaking Russian to each other. It didn't translate for me on TV. I don't know if it did for you guys, but I don't know exactly what they said. But what I found was crazy is they're just so casually looking at these violent graphic pictures of these dead women, and no one is even fazed by it. They're like, oh yeah, dead girls. We see that all the time. So you can just imagine what their lives are like, man. They're like desensitized to death and violence as if they like see it all the time. And then one girl is like, if she knows one of them, does she get to stay here in America? And obviously that's not how that works. And you don't even know if she's legitimately telling the truth or if she's just gonna say what she needs to say to get what she wants. I wish I had the translation of what they were saying. If you guys know what they were saying, let me know in the comments, because it seemed like there was a whole conversation that took place. But I guess we can speculate like, these guys just want some answers from us. They're not here to help us out. So the girls were probably like, well, fuck it. Why even bother? That's what I'm guessing was the conversation. That's what it felt like, at least. And yeah, at the end of it, A ship comes in. They have some work, and Nicky tells him, "Hey, we need to steal some chemicals. It's triple the rate per container." Obviously, Frank is enticed by that. Or I don't know if he was enticed by it or if he said no because he gave the paper back to Nicky. So I think he actually might have said no to the deal because the ship was in there, they had work, and Nicky was like, "Today we have a ship. Today we have work, but the writing's on the wall." And Frank says, "Fuck the wall." And that's just him resisting the sign of the times, this wave of evolution coming towards him. And no one in this community seems like they're going to be able to adapt in time. This is all they've ever known. And it sucks, man. Frank is part of a dying breed because robotics is going to take over soon, and it's going to be less and less work for people. So that's kind of it for 2x5. Let's move on to 2x6. Okay, looks like we made it. Looks like we caught up. So let's talk about the Wire 2x6 All Prologue. This is a very tragic episode. We'll get, for obvious reasons. But let's just talk about Omar and his shenanigans. We started out, some dudes doing a crossword, and Omar's talking about the god of war. The Ares was the answer, right? And he's like, "I was a big fan of Greek mythology in middle school." And it's just kind of funny picturing a young Omar maybe reading the Odyssey or just, studying up on his lore. And he kind of is a little bit of a god of war himself, right? He's always he's always ready for a fight. He's always ready for a confrontation. And obviously when he comes onto the stand in the courtroom, the tie stunt is so gangster, dude. And hey, they did say anything with a tie. So my man technically did follow the dress code, okay? He wore anything with a tie. So, but him being on the stand is just hilarious because he's so uncomfortably honest about everything. And we learned some things. He's like 29 years old, and I'm like, bro, you look way older than that. And that's just kind of, the amount he smokes, just being in the violent life that he's in. The shit he's done and the shit he's seen, that'll age you up real fast. So I was surprised to find out that he's 29 years old. And he says he's been ripping and running for 8 to 9 years. So he's been doing this since he was like 18, 19 years old. And he's like, how do I get by? A day at a time, I suppose. And he's just, he's doing what he was there to do, which was to testify against Bird. I don't know if he's telling the whole truth. I don't think so. I think he's just kind of pointing a finger at Bird. But Bird is a shithead, and he deserves to go to jail for what he did. But is it ethical? Is it ethical how all of this is going down? Omar telling a half-truth about Bird to get him into jail. Whether Bird deserves it or not, the answer, in my opinion, is no. This is not ethical because it's not the whole truth, and this isn't how the law should work. Especially, prosecutors do this all the time, where they will find all the pieces that fit their narrative, and if anything doesn't fit the narrative, they will either withhold that from the defense, which is a big no-no that could get you disbarred, but it happens all the time. That's why defense attorneys have a much more difficult job, because they can only work with the information that was given to them, and if anything was withheld from the prosecution, well, only the prosecution knows about it. So does Bird deserve to go to jail? Yes, but I don't think quite like this, because the court of law needs to work the same for everybody across the board, whether it has to stay unbiased. It has to stay the same for everybody. And I don't think that Bird really did get a fair trial here, because I don't think Omar is telling the truth about being a witness. But, it is what it is. But, in the courtroom, Levy is doing his best to try to get to him. And he's like, well, how are we supposed to trust you? I mean, you just admitted you're like a known liar. And again, you can trust Omar because he has nothing to hide. He's like, yeah, man, I lie. How can you trust me? I don't know. It's up to you guys. It's not up to me. I just came here to testify. So he's just there to testify and do what he needs to do. And I think people believe him because he's got nothing to hide. And I think the best exchange between him and Levy. He's like, hey man, you're doing the same shit I'm doing. It's just I got the shotgun, you got the briefcase, but it's all in the game, right? I think that was the best. And that gets to Levy, even though it really shouldn't, because, I mean, I'm sure Levy's aware that he's a crooked lawyer. So it was just a very funny exchange, and Omar just keeping it real 100%. And, of course, at the end of all that, you know, it's a successful case. Levi, he loses. Bird goes to jail, deserved. And Omar gets a get-out-of-jail-free card up to aggravated assault. Again, is that ethical? No, but that's how things work, you know? It's a very... The police are only as good as their informants, and lawyers are only able to do... I mean, lawyers can do their jobs effectively when they have people to testify against the defense, and sometimes that comes with stipulations. You know, it's a very... You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of situation. So now Omar has that get out of jail free card up to an aggravated assault. Again, this was all for the Gant case. The Gant case is something that is carrying on from episode 1 of this show, from season 1. So it's a very realistic portrayal of how long cases stay inside of court systems and how long it takes for people to get the justice that they deserve. Gant deserves justice, but again, Gant was one murder out of 300 per year in this city. So it's like, get in line, dude. So, you know, it's just, again, it's doing the thing that other shows don't do, which is like, oh, we solved the crime, let's move on. And, they, you know, everything is wrapped up in one episode. But here we are, almost midway through season 2, and we're still talking about events that happened in episode 1. So it's just awesome writing, just consistent all the way through. It's just awesome. It's just a good show, very good show. And while they are, you know, back on the case, they're looking into Sabatka, and they figure out, you know, he's got money, but he doesn't flash it. He's very smart about how and what he does with his money. He's got about 100 checkers left in his crew, which is down from 300 checkers from like maybe 10 or so years ago. And in the past few months, they have donated $70,000 to political PACs, which, again, going back to the lobbying scene, you know, they had to pay $40,000 just to get a hello with Clay Davis. And, like, what can you do? The whole notion of lobbying is so dirty, not in and of itself, because obviously, you know, you need to have people lobby your interests, but it's when people start contributing money and gifts and bribes to kind of, you know, skip place in line and get politicians' attention more. That's where the corruption starts. So if we could have lobbying without money and gifts and bribes, then I could see lobbying being a necessary thing, because there's so many companies out there with so many agendas and so many people with so many problems. Obviously, you have to have somebody representing you to go talk about those problems with the politicians to get what you want. It's just the politicians are always standing there with their hands out like, okay, well, what are you going to give me first? You know, that's where shit gets fucked up, when we start exchanging money and goods for stuff like that. But Sabatka is pretty smart about the way he runs his crew and the way he handles his money. So Nick meets Etan. So I actually talked about this in earlier discussion, but I think I had my episodes mixed up, so I was bouncing around. So this is the episode where they go to meet Prop Joe, and he says the cadaverous motherfuckers line. So this is the episode where, you know, things kind of end up working out. You know, Nicky has to go to bat for Ziggy, and Ziggy's just busy being Ziggy. And what's really shitty is at the end, you know, Nick hands him the $2,400 for the car, and immediately Ziggy buys beers for everybody, and then he lights a $100 bill on fire right there in front of everybody. It's just like, you can't sympathize with Ziggy, because he's just too much. He's too stupid, dude. He's too arrogant, too everything. He lacks the people skills. I know I've said this a billion times, but he lacks the people skills to navigate through life. That's his biggest problem. He never learned how to deal with people. And this is the episode with Elena. She was talking to the couple about the housing climate, and she's saying things like, with the economy being where it is, you can come in at 10 to 20% off of the asking price, meaning you can get a house for a pretty goddamn good deal. And again, like I said in the previously in the other discussions, this is the beginning to mass gentrification all across the United States, which is the beginning of the housing bubble, which is going to pop in 2008, around 2008. So a few years from now, but we can see the inception of it, the seeds being sown of it here and now. So that's a really, really good detail there. And the thing is, they didn't know about the housing bubble because this show was being filmed in real time. So they're just showing the sign of the times. No one knew that the housing bubble was going to pop in 2008. No one knew that was going to happen until it happened. So it's really cool to see the inception of that without them having known what was to come in the future. So it was just a scene that really stuck out to me. Yeah, McNulty is there. He's trying with Elena. I don't know what he's thinking. I mean, he lands one date. They have a decent time, I guess, end up having sex, and then in the morning he's like, well, I guess things are back to the way they were. Like, what did you think, McNulty? Like, did you think, like, the one date was going to solve everything? It was going to magically, like, fix your problems? Like, dude, come on. You have a lot more. Like, when you cheat in a relationship or break trust in a relationship in any way, shape, or form, that's like damn near irreparable. Like, it takes a lot of hard work to get back to any kind of normalcy after that. And McNulty is very, very naive for thinking that, oh yeah, one date. I'm gonna turn around here in one date. And in Kima, in other parts of the case, Kima goes to talk to Charlene, who is now in nursing school, and also with Lester. And it seems like they have a pretty good relationship going. But again, ethical? Question mark? I don't know, because Lester met her while she was an informant in an ongoing police investigation. So definitely some conflict of interest there, I would say. So it's hard to say whether that's, it was ethical for him to get with her or not, because she was in a very vulnerable place. But of course, Lester is a good dude. I'm sure he's treating her well. She seems to be on her feet and doing well. It's just kind of shaky how that relationship kind of started, right? But anyways, that leads them to going to the strip club with Kima and Prez going to the strip club, and Prez is just so awkward there because he's there with these two women. And yeah, it is awkward. I've gone to strip clubs for like birthday parties before where there were like girls there that you'd be hanging out with, and it is a little awkward. It's definitely awkward. So I can understand why he was like so awkward there, but then Cheryl too. Like Cheryl, you can see some trust issues forming in Kima and Cheryl's relationship too, and I feel like they need to have like a serious talk, because at this point I've already filmed up to 2x12 my talking points, so I'm kind of going back and having the hindsight of what's to come later, and there's some pretty serious things coming for them later, so this would have been the time to have a talk between Kima and Cheryl, because obviously things are a little rocky and there's definitely trust issues there, and I think that's something they need to figure out and work on. Lester and B are taking the information that they learned about the computer systems, and they're going through all of the ships, all of the containers, and they're figuring out a pattern slowly but surely. So, Lester, again, the detail-oriented man, doing what needs to be done, and they're getting there. They're getting there. They're making progress. Ziggy and Frank have an interesting conversation where we find out that Ziggy actually has a brother. Because Frank was like, oh, maybe I should have listened to your mother and let you go to college, community college. like your brother. And we don't see his brother. We don't know anything about his brother. I don't even know his brother's name. But it sounds like the man went to community college and had a good head on his shoulders and saw the community that was around him, and he was like, this ain't for me, and he got the fuck out of there. So wherever his brother is, he's probably doing a lot better than everybody else is right now. You do have instances of people that are getting out of this circumstance and doing something different and making a better life for themselves. Before we talk about D, let's just finish off with Nicky and Ziggy when they steal the truck for Eton and Spiros. Spiros is like, look, if you want cash, I got it for you. But, hear me out. Heroin. It's like, mafia people will pay you in drugs wherever they can because that kind of leaves the responsibility up to you. It is a good deal because you do make more money that way, but it's up to you to go flip those drugs and take the risk to make that money, right? There's an added thing there. And it's a sneaky thing that mafia people do because it's like they don't want to give up the money because that's like, it's money. That's not something that needs to be converted into anything else. But drugs, they flow endlessly like a fountain. So they have no problem paying you in drugs because they can replace that easily. Meanwhile, they don't have to give up any of their own money that they've already cleaned or earned. And it leaves the responsibility up to you. It's like, hey, I can pay you in drugs and you'll make way more money. And this was kind of the moment of no return when Nicky said half money, half drugs. Like just a few episodes ago, he was looking down on Ziggy for having a package and he was like, bro, I'm never going to fuck with that shit. And here we are. And you see Nicky and Ziggy just becoming slowly more and more reckless because they've got a taste for that easy money. I mean, when you're in a life like Nicky lives and you're down on your luck and you've got an ex-wife and a kid and you need to figure out a situation to get a house and get your life in order, you get a taste for the easy money. Yeah, dude, of course you're going to go for it. So you can't blame him, but this was also a big moment. This was the point of no return for Nicky, I would say. So now let's finish off with D, the biggest part of this episode, D's death. Let's talk about Stringer hiring the dude from DC, and the dude called it Drama City. And he described DC, and it was a similar story to what's going on in Baltimore. Drugs, violence. He said same soup, just reheated. And String is going all the way around Baltimore to make this connection. Nobody knows what he's doing, and this was the shittiest. I can understand all the other decisions he made, like the product is weak, the business is down, the clientele is moving everywhere, so he wants to work with Prop Joe to get the product in there. I can understand those decisions because he didn't have much of a choice, but killing D, that was fucked up. That was just like, why? Why did that one need to happen? And obviously it's going to have some really serious consequences, but you can see the wheels turning in his head. And the way he did it was pretty clean, too. The way that they killed D in prison, you always think about, anytime you see in a TV show where somebody gets killed in prison, it's usually through, like, a violent, like, they get shivved, like, 70 times in the chest and there's blood everywhere. And it's usually, like, a very violent thing that you see. But this was done very cleanly. Dude choked him out and made it look like a suicide. And it makes sense, dude. Just because you're in prison doesn't mean you want to add more years to your sentence if you can avoid it. So the fact that he worked clean, it's just something different. It's not something that you've ever seen before in terms of like a prison death. And it makes more sense. If you can work clean, why wouldn't you? And it's just tragic what happened with D. Because I think he was just sick of everybody's shit and he wanted to be left alone. And I think that if they would have left him alone, that it would have been fine. I think that D was finally kind of at a place of peace. He had kind of accepted his wrongdoings and the things that he had done in life, and he was owning up to them. He was telling his mom, like, hey, you can't help me. This is on me. This is the burden that I'm carrying for myself, not for you, not for your self-preservation. It's something that I'm doing for myself. And, when they're reading The Great Gatsby and Dee's interpretation of The Great Gatsby, he was like, it's not about what you want to front as. It's not about like who you think you are. It's about who you actually are and the things that you've done that shape you into what you'll become. And you have to own up to those things. And I think D was very much at that place. He was owning up to everything that he had done. He was taking responsibility, and all he wanted was just to be left the fuck alone. And of course, that wasn't good enough for Stringer. I think it was good enough for everybody else, because Avon, you know, that last shot of D seeing Avon in the hallway, and the camera's kind of like backing away from Avon, and it's the last time they see each other. But if it wasn't for Stringer, I'm sure that they would have been fine leaving D alone, because he wasn't going to roll, man. He would have been the old wise guy in prison helping younger inmates cope with their situations. That's what I would have envisioned D being in prison, just like that old dude that nobody fucks with and he doesn't fuck with anybody else. And it's just sad, dude. It's really sad what happened to him. It's, yeah, that one hurt. That one hurt. But obviously, Stringer made this decision, and now he's going to have to live with the consequences of it whenever those creep up, and we'll see what happens with that. So that's it. That's it for 2x6. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I wanted to come back and do all of the missing episodes for you guys. Didn't want to leave you hanging, so if you took the time to watch this video, and if you took the time to comment below, thank you so much. I appreciate the support. So I am officially now back in the regular reactions. You'll see my segment again. And yeah, we'll just go from there. Thanks so much for watching. Love you guys. See you soon. Peace.